There's more to Genesis 1 than meets the eye, and it's pretty amazing. The basic structure of the narrative sets us up with a dilemma. At the beginning of when God created the world, the earth was dark, formless, and devoid of life. Then he goes on to solve each of these problems day by day through an act of creation. But there's a specific structure to how he goes about it. In fact, it's not just one structure. There are narrative and literary patterns layered on top of each other. And when you see them all together, you'll be amazed at the genius of the author of this creation account. The first thing to notice about the days of creation is that there are two sets of three. The first set are what I'm calling domains. Day number 1 is the domain of time, day and night. This is also where he corrects the problem of darkness that is mentioned in the beginning. On day 2, the waters are split into the sky and the sea. On day 3, the land is separated from the sea and plants are formed. By this point, God has solved the problem of formlessness, which brings us to the second set of 3, and the void being filled with inhabitants. On day 4, the daytime is populated by the sun, and the nighttime is populated by the moon and stars. On day 5, the heavens are filled with flying birds, and the waters below are filled with sea creatures. On day 6, the habitable land is filled with animals and humans. As you can see, the first and second set of 3 pair with each other, creating an overlaying ABC pattern. However, when laid out this way, it also folds up and down. Days 1 and 4 and half 2 and 5 relate to that which is above. The other half of 2 and 5 and the days 3 and 6 relate to that which is below. Each day also has a pairing of creation with a greater and lesser or higher and lower. These things alone show a careful and creative authorship. It's all right there, but you don't necessarily see it when you read it as a narrative. And as neat as these patterns are, there's so much more. Because on top of this layer of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is another layer of 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. That is to say, there is a mirrored structure within the language of the text that overlaps the pattern that we already looked at. This structure is called a chiasm, and it's all throughout Scripture, especially in the book of Genesis. A chiasm usually has a central axis, which is an emphasis or sometimes a turning point that leads to a reversal or inversion of the first half. In this case, we see both a repetition and a reversal. There is an overall chiasm that covers the creation account, as well as smaller chiastic patterns within the verses. Moving from the outside to the inside, in Genesis 1:1, God creates, and in the end, he rests from his work of creation. Now keep in mind, we're looking at the language within these sentences. In Genesis 1:2, the earth is without form, devoid of life, darkness. The Spirit of God hovers over the waters. In verse 20 through 30, God fills the waters, the earth, and the living creatures. In verse 3 through 8, God creates the light and the firmament of the heavens. In 14 through 19, the heavens are filled with individual lights to rule and divide the day and night. In verse 9 through 10a, God causes the dry land to appear, and then we have the central axis, which is that God saw that it was good. And then in 11 through 13, God fills that dry land with grass, herbs, and fruit-bearing trees. Then we have an example of a smaller chiasm in verses 14 through 18, dividing between the mention of days, the giving of light, and the ruling over the day. And then it mentions each of those in reverse order. So we have the overlapping patterns of the sets of 3, we have the mirrored patterns of the chiasms, but that's not all, because there are also patterns of 7 within this account that we miss in our English versions. Obviously, there are 7 days, including the final day of rest, but did you know that there are 7 words in the first verse of Genesis? Those 7 words are composed of 28 letters, 7 times 4. In the beginning, God created, and the heavens and the earth each have 14 letters. The second verse has 14 words, 7 times 2. Throughout the chapter, the key words God, land, and skies all appear in multiples of 7, as does the phrase, God saw that it was good. Tim Mackey of the Bible Project notes that there are 7 paragraphs in Genesis 1:1 through 2:3 marked by evening and morning, The concluding 7th paragraph in Genesis 2:1-3 begins 3 lines which have 7 words each. He goes on to state that God speaks 10 times in this creation account. 7 times are divine creative commands to the creation itself, let there be. 3 times are divine initiatives toward humanity. Let us make, be fruitful and multiply. Behold, I have given to you. All of these exist within a coherent narrative structure that has a beginning, middle, and end. On top of this, there are layers of meaning that we can draw from the text. For example, we can gain insight into the act of creation as not only making a physical thing, but creating distinction between physical things and naming them. That is, giving them a distinct identity. In that way, Adam goes on to join God in the act of creation by giving identities to the animals of the earth. There are many such lessons from the creation account, but the greatest lesson of all is that just like the earth, our lives, apart from God's power, are dark, disordered, and devoid of life. But Jesus came as the light of the world, gave us purpose and new life. 2 Corinthians 4:6 says, "For it is the God who commanded light to shine out of darkness, who has shown in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ." And there is much more to this first chapter of the Bible than this, but hopefully you've gotten a glimpse of how much can be hidden underneath a surface reading of the text, not only for Genesis 1, but the rest of the Bible as well. The biblical authors knew what they were doing, and we can find hidden patterns and added meaning when we pay special attention. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. Shalom.